Yay! Okay, so, oh my god, it's turned live. Yay! Okay, so I'm so excited to be doing this. I'm Ali, guys. So if you don't know me, I'm Alliteration, which is pronounced like alliteration, but spelled like A-L-E, on Bookstagram. And I'm joined today by Jen Wilson.
Hi.
If you guys don't know, she wrote the New World series, and she wrote New World Rising. So actually, her book New World Ashes is coming out in June or July.
June 7th. So June 7th is when that comes out.
Yay! So if you guys haven't read New World Rising, I think you should go read it like right now, because it's seriously like 5 out of 5 stars read. And like I was telling Jen, it's really hard for me not to fangirl over this right now, because I just want it so much. And it's amazing. So you should go read it right now. So we're gonna be doing a couple questions. This is going on Jen's channel, I think. Yeah. Jen's
yeah.
So my channel is just like my name, like on Bookstagram. So if you want to go subscribe to me, you can totally do that after this, because I'm going to be posting more videos. So yeah, I guess we're just going to get started. And if you want to join us and ask any questions, whatever you want to do, you can post it in the Q&A thing below. I think it's in the comments.
Yep,
Yeah.
I think it should be in the comments. And then tweeting works well as well. Both Ali and I have our Twitter accounts up so we can see anything that you guys ask.
Yes. So I think Jen's is J_K Wilson, and mine's Alliteration.
Perfect.
Not a taken name on internet. So we're gonna start, I guess, by like New World Rising, and then we'll move on to New World Ashes, just because that's the way the trilogy rolls. So New World Rising. Well, my first question that I wrote down was, where did this idea come from? So it was a very original, like, dystopian book. So I'm really excited to know that.
That's a great question. And this is the cover too, if anybody hasn't seen it. And it's an image, I think, but you get the idea. So the idea for New World Rising was actually built around Phoenix herself. I had this vision of this girl standing on a rooftop, and she had her hood up, and the wind is blowing, and the city below her is absolutely decimated. And she had this kind of like hard, cold look to her, and I needed to know what her story was, and the story from there spiraled out around her. So Phoenix was really where the story began, and then the tribes in Tartarus and all the city was built around her after that point.
That sounds interesting. I wish I had those like visions, all those dreams. So like talking about the tribes, how did they develop? Like, were they inspired by like any actual tribe in the world, or like anything like that?
That's an awesome question. When I first started writing the series, I actually thought of the tribes initially as gangs, because they have a lot of similarities when you think of like gang members, and how it's got that like join or die mentality, and they do it for survival, but then if it's almost impossible to leave one of the tribes. When I started that, my husband and I, he's my sounding board for a lot of stuff. When I have like brain problems, he kind of helps dig me out of the hole I dig myself into. And he and I talked about it, and he's like, oh, I love this concept, but he's like, don't call them gangs. It sounds too like city, you know, ish, like current times. So we kind of thought about it. And then I was inspired by one of the questions you had asked is if it's like after actual tribes. So I thought, you know, this is going into the future, but there are also these people that have kind of become less humanized. They've lost a lot of their modern day understandings. Technology is going away. A lot of them don't read. And I wanted to kind of bring it back to when you think of not like caveman era, but much older, when there were tribes that had joined to survive within the world. So that's kind of where they came and changed and developed from, essentially.
So the first few pages in the book, there were like drawings in it. Was that how you initially imagined the tribe to be like?
Oh, definitely, yeah. So those are some of the more refined sketches. There's some really bad ones, of course, that didn't make it to the book. But it was just like that building of like how I saw them. And I did this really silly photograph series like 2 years ago, where I actually dressed up as a member of each of the tribes. I don't know if you've seen
yeah.
But it's me in each of the parts to help like envision and like get into the characters and all that kind of stuff. I'll post that so you can see it.
Yeah, you should. So like talking about like how you set it futuristically, was it always your idea for it to be like a dystopian?
Yes, I nerd out on dystopian. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's a trend, but I've always loved that type of series. I mean, since for years and years. Like, you have books that were written in the 50s that are amazing dystopians, and in the 80s, and you know, currently there's this big trend of them. But it's definitely a genre that I'm drawn to, and I guess because it was also a really good opportunity to write a really strong female character who doesn't like have the stereotypical worries of everyday life. She's not your normal teenager, and you don't really get that in other settings all the time. Dystopian kind of forces that on your characters, so that's where that came from.
And I found it, like, personally, I found it very easy to relate, like, at times, like, because of her reading passion.
Mm-hmm.
And she was, I just felt like I was like, you know, I kind of like can relate to that. Like, I would also go someplace and steal books if I had the chance.
I love that.
When I read that, I was like, ooh, I would totally do that. Like, I hadn't thought about like burning books, and kind of like cringed a little when I thought about that when I was reading it. But then I was like, I need to do that. If like anything happens to this world, I'm gonna go out there and burn some books.
Go live in a library for a while.
Right there. So like, what's I lost my word. I had like a question ready. So like, talking about Phoenix, how did you develop like her personality? Was it inspired by anyone?
That's a really good question. Phoenix is actually a lot of me. As terrible as that sounds, and I don't mean that to sound bad, because I know she's really cold, and especially in the beginning when before she meets Mouse and kind of figures out who she is as a person. But she's very calculated in her thinking, and it's a lot. She's very strategic and less emotional. And not to say I'm not an emotional person. I do cry when I read a good review, or you know, all those kind of things. But she definitely thinks more logically, which is how I tend to think. So Phoenix is a little bit of me meets a little bit of Sydney Bristow. Have you ever seen the show Alias?
No.
I love that show. It's like she's this action hero. She's like totally BA. She's amazing. She kicks butt. So she's got a little bit of Sydney Bristow in her too. So she's got that fight in her. Her character too. It's interesting. She started out really, really cold, and the more I started writing Mouse, the more I realized that Phoenix was growing, and it wasn't even an intentional thing. It just kind of started to happen. As that character developed, Phoenix started to change as I was writing her. So it's one of those things that it's interesting when you create a world, sometimes the other characters that you write start changing your story, even when you're not really aware of that, like, intention at first.
I really liked it. That's actually one of the things, like, when I was like, my sister, she kind of has gotten out of reading. She had like a huge dystopian, like, binge reading time in her life. And now she's at college, so she doesn't read it like that much. And when I talked about New World in the series, I was like, yeah, you can see like Phoenix growing a lot throughout the book, like with Mouse and everything. And definitely like Mouse is what she was like, oh, I need to read this book because I like the idea of there being a younger character.
Mm-hmm.
And like, when I thought about that, I was like, how did you get inspired? Was like Mouse initially going to be part of the story, or did she just like appear? She
was always going to be part of the story for me. It wasn't really. It's interesting, as I wrote her, she began to develop more as a key character. At first, it wasn't really my intention when I very, very first started writing it, and then as you'll read actually in New World Ashes, she is a big part of the storyline, and you'll find out even more in the third and final book in the series as well, that she is a key character. And when I wrote her initially, it was like, oh, I knew she wasn't going to speak because of fear. And then it was like, no, I actually don't want her to be able to speak, because there's something that's about her that you love and that she's genuine, and it's all through action. And it was really interesting to write a character who speaks very loudly but never actually has any words. So that was kind of an interesting development for me, as to how to write someone who doesn't say anything, but you still have to have that emotional love for her. And she kind of becomes everything Phoenix is in Lost. She's like a little sister. She's like a child. She's herself essentially in a younger version.
Yeah, I like that because like Mouse, it seemed like Mouse was like kind of like the innocence of like that Phoenix had lost. So it was kind of like, it felt like as Mouse came into her life, like Phoenix kind of opened herself up more. Like
exactly.
So I really love that because like you could tell that it was a growing like person in her.
Yeah.
Is there gonna be Mouse in the next like book? Because like I don't want to spoil anything, but like I don't want to spoil the ending to anybody who's read it, hasn't read it. But you know, I have the feeling that Mouse is not going to appear as much in the next book, or is she?
She is in the next book, but it's interesting. It wasn't intentional, but the focus tends to be a little bit more on Phoenix and everything inside the wall, and it's kind of learning a lot of back history for the characters. And there's also essentially a new cast that comes into the storyline as well, because you're meeting everybody that stayed inside of the sanctuary, and it's a totally different world. I mean, everything there is completely different, from how they dress to how they behave to what they eat to their daily jobs. Everything is completely different. So you do still see Mouse, but she's not quite at the forefront. Really, in the third book is where you're going to see all of the characters collide, and everybody kind of gets pushed to the front of the storyline. So she is in Ashes, but it takes a little bit to get back to her, and there are going to be a couple parts I think that some fans are really going to hate me for. So all I have to say is, when you get to those parts, just make sure to keep reading. That's the only thing I ask.
You'll have to check my Goodreads update when I start reading New World Ashes.
Okay.
Start like raving about it. So, like talking about New World Rising, like would you change anything now looking back at it?
Oh my gosh, of course. So I think that's one of the things as an author you struggle with. At some point, I mean, your books are your babies, but at some point you have to let go, because otherwise you would never publish everything. You just keep changing it and editing and re-editing and changing. And I always, when I get stuck, like when I have kind of a writer's block, I tend to go back and read some of my other, like the first books that I've written, because it helps me reconnect with the story and reconnect with the mindset that I was in when I was writing it. And there's always parts where you read something and you're like, oh, well, that was crap. I can't believe I wrote that. But then, you know, you develop and you grow. And I can even see that within my writing from Rising to Ashes. There's developments and changes, because as much as I change the characters also change me. So my writing has kind of grown and changed from that. So there are things that I would change, but I also wouldn't, because of the fact that I think that's part of the growth process for me, is you have to make those things that you're going, well, that wasn't so great, but I'll do it better next time.
Yeah, I honestly thought you did an amazing job. Like, it was honestly so well written, and there were so many amazing quotes in the book. Like, I actually had like my Goodreads review. I had a little part that said like my favorite quotes, and they were so good. Like, I kept like highlighting them. So like going back to I guess like the characters. Trivian, am I saying that name right? Trivian.
Sorry, what was that? You just broke up a little bit.
Am I saying Trivian right? Is it Trivian or?
Triven, Triven, yeah. Some of the names I think are going to throw people a little bit, because a lot of them are in my mind. So Triven, yeah.
So Trivian, how did you come up with his like sort of like unique personality? Because honestly, like when the first scenes, okay, so anybody who's watching this has to have read the first chapters, because this is what happens in the first chapters. He kind of like comes here, and he kind of like, he's really kind, and it just like it was a soon moment for me. I was like, I love this guy, like this guy. Like, how did you come up with him? Like, was it inspired by anyone? Was it like he honestly is like so different from any other dystopian guy. Dystopian guys are harsh, and it felt like Phoenix was the one who was like harsh in this like relationship, and Trivian was like the nice one.
Mm-hmm. I love that you bring it up that way. He's the funniest, everybody always says, and it's true, to write what you know. So every one of my characters have qualities of friends I have, people in my family, people that I've encountered in my life, things I've witnessed. Everything kind of helps to inspire and build those characters. Triven has a little bit of a few people that I love dearly in him. I won't mention names as to not embarrass them, but there's a lot of those different pieces. And it was also really important to me in this book that Phoenix is incredibly strong. And you will find in Ashes, she gets a little broken and she realizes that she needs people sometimes, and that's okay to need people. But I really wanted a book where she didn't need a strong male to be her hero, to be her knight in shining armor. Triven needed to be a character that could support her and help develop her character, but not necessarily carry the weight for her as like a leading lady necessarily. So yeah, that's kind of where he came in. And I also wanted someone who was the complete opposite of her, because you think of a world and being raised in a world like this, both for Mouse and Phoenix, and how destroyed and how angry they are. And you still have to have, Triven is like the hope, essentially. He's kind of the silver lining, that even when everything can go badly, that things can still be okay and there still are good people out there.
Yeah, I felt like he kind of reminded her of like the good that was left.
Exactly.
Yeah, he was just there, like in the right times, in the right places, it just seemed like, and kind of got her back like all the time. And I really liked how like the relationship wasn't like the key part of the story. Mm-hmm. And it was like, it really developed. I felt like it developed at the last 25% of the book, like reports through it. Yeah, because I normally read a lot of romance, and it just seemed like this book at first, like when the first chapters, I was like, I don't know if like there's any romance in this, but I'm gonna keep reading because it's actually really good. And then I kept reading, and then I just read, and I was like, you know what? I don't care if there's any romance. It's gonna be an action-packed book with like no guy in it. I'm just gonna read it. And then this guy, I was like, oh, I ship you with her. You know, if you were a real character, I would go stalk. If you're a real person, I would go stalk your house. And he just seemed awesome. And like, is he gonna change like in the next book? Is he gonna become a little more harsh or something? Or a little like strong?
Not necessarily harsh. I'm interested to hear what people think of Ashes. Actually, between the two, I think I like Ashes better. I know that's probably bad to say, but it's like the writing in it I feel stronger in, and the storyline. But Triven in this, he and Phoenix go through a lot, and they both get pushed into a world that's not their comfort zone. So they change a little bit, and you're going to see a different side to both of them that kind of deals with his development and some of his insecurities as well, because he's not really insecure in the first book, and you see some human qualities come to Triven and some mistakes that he makes. So I think it's a good change for him. It's something his character needed to build, but he's always going to be kind of a good guy. You can't really take that away.
And I think he was the first one to be kind of paternal with Mouse. Mm-hmm. That still happen, they kind of seem like the parents that Mouse doesn't have anymore, and that's not going to change, right? Because I don't want that.
I can't give too much away, but no, they're pretty much a solid little strange family unit for the series.
Okay, that's good. And how's their relationship going to develop, like Trivian's and Phoenix's relationship in the next 2 books?
That's a great question. You see some strain put on their relationship in Ashes because of some things that she goes through. I mean, if you've read Rising, the first book, of course, people are usually screaming and cursing me at the end of it, which you have to read it to find out why. Let's just say I like the fingers. And Ashes kind of sets it up. The first chapter is in the very end of Rising, so you kind of see what the book is going to develop into, and the characters will change and their relationship will change, but the core of who they are, I think, will stay there. But mostly, it's hard to explain. I think you'll see a little bit more broken between the two, but it's not anything that's unfixable, and it's not going to be, you know, epic romance, tragedy, love. I think Phoenix's story is always going to oversee the romance side of it.
Okay. So I guess like just to clear something up that I heard people saying, or like at least people predicting, it's not going to be a love triangle, or is there going to be a love triangle? I really can't keep them apart. Like, I really
love that. You know, there's been a lot of flack because there's like every book has like a love triangle in it now. There is another character that you will meet that obviously shows interest in her, but it's not a reciprocated thing. And he's kind of a strange character, honestly. I'm curious to see what people think about him, but it's because it's more of her history, I think, that's coming through than it is about like the romance. It's trying to understand who she was and where she came from, essentially.
Okay. So I'm gonna try to like not expect that, but then
be open-minded.
Like disappointed. So talking about New World Ashes, since we moved on to that, what can we, the readers, expect from the second?
So this book is taking off essentially right where the last one left, which is this guy. I don't know if you guys can even see it because it's glowing pretty brightly. My camera can't really understand that. But it picks up pretty much right where Rising left off. So none of that, I won't, you know, I left everybody on such a cliffhanger at the end of Rising. I'm not going to be cruel and make them wait for another 6 chapters before anything is answered or figured out. I couldn't do that. So it picks up pretty much essentially right away. And the first few chapters, I'm not going to lie, are rough. It's going to be heavy reading for a lot of people. And I'm really interested to see what fans think of this book, because it is a little bit darker. It's a little bit more backstory too. So you're going to figure out more about the characters, more about the development, and it really sets it up for the third book. I think people are going to get answers that they didn't get in Rising, which is a good thing. But of course, you can't have, you know, the big finale, of course, has to be saved till the end. So that'll be an inferno in 2017.
Yay. Have you started writing it actually? Like just throwing that out there?
Yes. Some of it's actually written down into documents now, but most of it's either up here or scrawled all over notes that are sprawled on my desk that makes my husband nuts. But it's like how my brain works really chaotically. I get an idea like when I'm in the shower or at the grocery store, and I just write stuff down really quickly. So I have like a binder of notes that's scattered all over everything.
So like you didn't use any like templates or anything to like draft your like building your world? Just like came out of nowhere?
Yeah, I don't necessarily use like an exact science necessarily. Like I don't have a strict way. I'm kind of what you would call like a creative hot mess essentially. But I definitely like build and grow on things, and then I'll do sketches and stuff to kind of help me visualize what I'm thinking about. And then for every book that I write, and I actually have a whole other series that I put on the back burner when I started writing Rising, which the first book is finished, and I'll probably come back to it maybe in about 2 years. That I always write what they call like character Bibles or character journals, which has every single character that shows up in that story, and it's their eye color, their hair, what they eat for breakfast, like random things that won't actually show up in the book, but it gives me an in-depth detail. And I usually do buildings in that as well to help with the story building. So that's kind of what keeps me together in my chaotic mess of a mind.
Would you ever publish that, like the journals? Just like,
maybe it might frighten people to see how my mind works. So I don't know. That could be something that if we ever did like a special edition, I would think about doing the character journal so that everyone could see and read and see the insight to the characters. That it's so much more than just a name and a face. Like they're developed into people essentially.
And like I guess talking about like publishing like parts of New World, are you thinking about publishing any like novellas or any short stories?
I love that question. I've thought about it. If I write one, I actually have thought about writing one from Triven's perspective when he's younger, because Phoenix really is the key character, and she's the one that you find out and know the most about. And Triven, being a supporting character, doesn't necessarily have that really exaggerated backstory. And I've developed his parents really strongly as well. So I've thought about writing like a novella about him and his parents and maybe their escape from the city, essentially. But that'll be a ways out if that happens.
Well, I'll expect it. Like, whenever you publish it, I would be the first one to pre-order and just like get on it. So like, I saw on your Goodreads page that you had published like the first and second book before, like way back.
Yes.
Anything changed from that? Like, did you, I don't know, like, change parts of the
story or anything? So what a lot of people don't realize when becoming an author, it's writing it is the easiest part. It's getting it out there that's always the most difficult. So a lot of big publisher companies, you have to have an agent first, and you have to be picked up by an agent, and they get thousands of requests a day for people to pick up their books. So it's a tough industry to kind of break into. And I got a little discouraged at first when I got some rejection letters, because they said dystopian was a dying trend and they didn't want to put out a book that was in that genre anymore, which is understandable. So instead of getting discouraged, I decided to self-publish. So that's when you saw the first two published originally by myself. And after being out, yeah, if it makes sense. So the books haven't really changed. About right after I published New World Ashes for the first time, and it was only out for like 3 weeks, and Ben of Off Tomes Publishing, who is fabulous, came to me and is like, I love these books. We've worked together before. I want to take you under my wing and bring you into my new micro-publishing company. And it was like match made in heaven. I think I was doing a happy dance for like 5 days. But Ben is so fantastic, and he brought me under his wing, and we did that together. So mostly what changed with him was just the formatting of the books, because you'll notice they're a little thicker. So they have a different design to the interiors, and the covers changed. Kim G did the designs for the new covers, and they are phenomenal. Like, I am absolutely blown away by her work. So it was really cool to take something I had originally did on my own and hand it over to somebody else and see their creative interpretation of what I did. But other than that, same books, I promise.
Well, like talking about the cover designs, like, I absolutely love them. Like, I have a coding class, like I told you, and we have this part where we Photoshop. And I was actually thinking about making fan art in my coding class. And I was like trying to like Photoshop and work how to do it. And then people were seeing like the cover. They were like, "Oh my God, did you make that like in Photoshop?" And I was like, yeah. This all goes out to like Jen Wilson and her team, and they were like, "Oh my God, so beautiful!" And like my teacher was like raving about it, and my friends were raving about it, and it was awesome. Everyone loves the cover. Like,
that's so awesome. I give Kim a lot of credit. She basically what she did is she took the original series covers I designed, and when we did the redesign, she wanted to be true to the ones that I had done. So she worked with me on like kind of brainstorming and coming up with these creative ideas, and I threw a bunch of random stuff at her, and that's what she came back with. And I mean, the woman is incredibly talented. I don't know if you've seen any of the other covers she's done, but she's amazing. I'm so thankful that I get to work with her.
That's great. Like, I guess it's like awesome to have like a great team.
Yes.
Like, and talking about Off Tomes, like I've read you and I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name right, Gabriella Lear.
Yeah, she's amazing as well, and that's one of the best things too, that in our micro publishing company, they've created this really great family feeling, and we all talk about our writings and our struggles and the good things and the bad things, and we support each other. It's probably one of the best experiences I've ever had, and it's really good to know that I'm not the only one that struggles with like writer's block, or there's days where you just can't seem to find the motivation to write. It's not even about block. You can't seem to get the words out. You know, it's a good thing. It's amazing to be taken into this community, and the book community itself, authors, writers, booktubers, reviewers are some of the best people I've had the pleasure to meet and work and talk with. I mean, it's really been an amazing, life-changing experience.
So sweet. Like, what I really liked about your book, talking about like writer's block, sometimes I feel like books like some books that are like New York Times bestsellers, like I feel like maybe the author had like a little bit of a writer's block, and then they picked up again, and the voice kind of changed.
Yeah.
But I read your book like through like one sitting, 3 a.m. in the morning. Had a biology test the next day, but I kept reading it. And I honestly felt like you were telling it, like, because there was no like voice shift. It was kind of like all like it felt like it was at the same pacing. Just like it was amazing. And
that's good to hear. Thank you. That's something I think every author like struggles with. So that's so reassuring to hear that.
Well, I guess like those are all the questions I had like planned out a little bit, and some other more. Should we like get people to like Q&A?
Yeah, I said it. You know, if anyone has any questions, feel free to tweet them to either Allie or myself. We're happy to respond. But I think right now, I'm sure a lot of people my time are probably getting ready for dinner.
Probably. I know like it says here the Q&A feature is disabled.
Oh, it is on yours? Let me see if I can
yeah.
put it up on here. Q&A. Oh, yeah. They might just have to tweet it to you and just make sure to tag you or I in it. I think that's probably the best way to get that to work. Yeah, it won't pop up on mine for some reason either. Strange. Sorry, guys, for the technical difficulties if anybody's watching that. But feel free to tweet to either one of us, and we'll make sure that we answer any questions that you guys have.
Yeah, we will. Let's see. I haven't checked Instagram, to be honest.
Tech stuff is fun.
Let's see. Oh, I forgot. I had a friend on Bookstagram who wanted the link, and I never sent her the link.
That might be it for today. Is there any other things like if you could ask me about the books that you would want to, or is that pretty much it for you, I think?
I don't know. I wanted novellas. I want short stories. I just really want to see Pix again and Mouse, and just like, could there be like a backstory as to why Mouse, like, or like sort of.
You find out some of that in Ashes, so you'll get a little bit of detail as to what happened to Mouse and where she comes from. And I'm not going to give anything away, but you find out even more in Inferno. So Inferno is obviously the last book in the series. And I think I know now where the story is going to be going, but of course I always say that and it changes. So I'm going to stick with I know what's going to happen, and then we'll see if that's really what ends up coming out at the very end.
What was I going to get at? So like, is it hard like letting go of like your sort of like your baby, like letting it go last installment of the.
It is. It's almost like I'm struggling. I'm not going to lie. I'm struggling a little bit to write this one, and I think it's because it's like the end of an era, and I know that once I finish it, that's the end of the story. So getting the motivation to let go of that is really hard. But it's a good thing though. I need that to happen because I have 2 other books that it's like keep kind of firing in my brain, and I want to write them. But when you were talking about keeping that consistency within the storyline, I don't want to start writing these other stories because I don't want crossover between the characters because they're very different. So it's so important that I stick to one and then go back to focusing on the other.
Okay, so yeah, I guess that's like all I had to say. If you have like any announcements, I guess you want to make that people. I really don't know how to see if anybody's viewing us right now.
Well, that's okay. We've got a couple, but I guess the biggest things right now that I can say that are exciting is, this weekend. So if you're watching right now and New World Ashes or New World Rising is something that you've wanted to read, but everybody has school and textbooks and is broke, I get that. We're having a 99-cent sale for the Kindle versions on Amazon right now. So that's huge. I have to plug that. And all my sister authors, their books are also the same way. So check out offtomespublishing.com, and that'll give you a link to all the books. They're fantastic. I can't say enough about all the other authors that I'm working with. They're the most amazing people. And And then don't forget, June 7th is when New World Ashes will be available live. You can pre-order for Kindle now, but the paperback version won't be available until June 7th. So that's it for me, I guess.
Yay! So guys, you should go out, buy New World Rising right now, or maybe later on, so you don't have to like wait and like sort of like fangirl or dying inside like I am right now. I want to know more. But yeah, buy it this weekend, buy it sometime later on, and pre-order. So
Great.
yeah, I guess, yeah, thank you for watching, everyone who's watching. Two of my friends are watching. So bye.